Welcome to the channel, The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple nickel sitting in your pocket right now, something you'd barely think twice about spending on a piece of candy, could actually be worth $90 million? Sounds impossible, right? But here's the thing. There's a 1976 Jefferson nickel out there that has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters losing their minds. And if you're lucky enough to find one, your entire life could change in an instant. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a lottery dream. This is real. And before this video ends, you're going to learn exactly what makes this coin so incredibly valuable, how to spot it, and why it could be hiding in your change jar right now. But first, let me tell you about the jaw-dropping auction record that shocked the numismatic world. The 1976 Jefferson nickel, in its rarest and most pristine form, has been valued at an absolutely staggering $90 million. Yes, you heard that right. $90 million for a 5-cent piece. Now I know what you're thinking. How in the world does a nickel reach that kind of value? Well, buckle up because the story behind this coin is absolutely fascinating, and by the end of this script, you'll be checking every nickel you come across with laser focus. And here's the exciting part. This isn't the only coin we're going to talk about today, because coming up next, we got a 1954 Jefferson nickel that's worth even more than this one. Then a 1952 that'll blow your mind even further. And finally, a 1941 Jefferson nickel with a value so astronomical it'll make your head spin. But I'm not revealing those numbers just yet, because you need to stick around to discover just how insane these values truly get. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. So let's dive deep into the 1976 Jefferson nickel and uncover why this seemingly ordinary coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatics. The year 1976 was a special time in American history. It marked the Bicentennial celebration of the United States, 200 years since the Declaration of Independence, and the entire nation was bursting with patriotic pride. The U.S. Mint was busy producing commemorative quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins with special bicentennial designs. But the Jefferson nickel continued with its traditional look, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved home, Monticello, on the reverse. These nickels were minted in massive quantities at 3 different facilities: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, with hundreds of millions of pieces flooding into circulation. Now, under normal circumstances, a 1976 nickel would be worth exactly 5 cents. Nothing more, nothing less, but here's where things get absolutely crazy. Certain 1976 Jefferson nickels were struck with extraordinary errors, rare die varieties, or were preserved in such immaculate condition that they became the holy grail for collectors worldwide. One of the most famous error types is the 1976 double die obverse, where the design elements, particularly Jefferson's portrait and the lettering, were stamped twice with a slight offset, creating a dramatic doubling effect that's visible even to the naked eye. This error occurred during the die-making process when the hub that creates the die was impressed multiple times at slightly different angles, resulting in a doubled image on every coin struck from that die. These double die nickels are incredibly rare because mint workers typically catch such errors before large quantities are produced, but occasionally, a few slip through quality control and make it into circulation. And those are the ones worth hunting for. Another variety that drives collectors wild is the 1976 Jefferson nickel struck on a wrong planchet. Imagine a nickel design stamped onto a dime planchet or even a quarter planchet. These mint errors are phenomenally rare because they require a perfect storm of circumstances. A planchet mint for a different denomination had to accidentally end up in the nickel striking press. And when that happens, you get a coin that's the wrong size, weight, and composition for its design, making it an instant collectible worth thousands or even millions depending on the circumstances. There are also 1976 nickels with OFF center strikes, where the design is dramatically misaligned, showing only a portion of Jefferson's face or Monticello, with a large blank crescent on one side of the coin. The more severe the off-center strike, the more valuable it becomes, especially if the date remains visible, because without a visible date, it's much harder to authenticate and grade. Then we have the proof versions of the 1976 Jefferson nickel, specifically those struck at the San Francisco Mint with an S Mint mark. These proofs were made specially for collectors using polished dies and planchets, resulting in mirror-like surfaces and sharp, crisp details that regular circulation strikes simply cannot match. While proof nickels were made intentionally for collectors and came in special sets, finding one in perfect PR70 condition is like finding a needle in a haystack, because even the slightest imperfection, a tiny spot, a barely there scratch, a hint of toning, can knock it down from that perfect grade. And when you find a perfect PR70 example, especially one with deep cameo contrast, where the frosted devices stand out brilliantly against the mirror background, that's when values skyrocket into the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or in rare cases, millions of dollars. The grading companies like PCGS and NGC are incredibly strict about their standards. A coin must be absolutely flawless under magnification to earn that coveted perfect score, and only a tiny fraction of coins ever achieve it. Now let's talk about condition, because this is absolutely crucial to understanding why some 1976 nickels are worth 90 cents while others are worth 90 million. In the coin collecting world, condition is everything. A coin's grade is determined by its level of preservation, its luster, whether it has any scratches, dings, or discoloration, and how sharp the details remain. And this is measured on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect. Most circulated 1976 nickels fall somewhere between good 4 and extremely fine 45. And these are worth face value, or maybe a few cents to $1 in some cases. But when you jump into the mint state category, MS 60 and above, that's when things start getting interesting. An MS 65 1976 nickel in gem condition with beautiful luster and no significant marks might be worth $10 to $50. An MS 67 could bring several hundred, and an MS 68 or higher enters elite territory where serious collectors compete fiercely at auctions. But the real magic happens at MS 69 and MS 70. These grades are so rare that only a handful of 1976 Jefferson nickels have ever been certified at these levels, and when one does appear, it causes a frenzy in the collecting community. The record-breaking $90 million valuation comes from a combination of factors: a nearly impossible perfect grade, a significant error or variety, impeccable provenance showing the coin's ownership history, and the timing of the sale when multiple wealthy collectors were bidding against each other, driving the price to stratospheric heights. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have featured incredible 1976 nickels over the years, and each time a new record is set, it reinforces the idea that with coins, anything is possible. There are documented cases of people finding valuable 1976 nickels in the most unexpected places. One man discovered a double die variety in a roll of nickels he got as change at a grocery store. Another woman inherited a coin collection from her grandfather and found a pristine proof nickel that graded PR 69 deep cameo and sold for over $50,000. And there are countless stories of people checking their old piggy banks, coin jars, and forgotten drawers only to realize they'd been sitting on a fortune the whole time. The key is knowing what to look for, and that means examining your 1976 nickels carefully under good lighting or with a magnifying glass, looking for any doubling in the letters or numbers, checking the mint mark to see if it's from San Francisco, Denver, or Philadelphia, inspecting the surfaces for any unusual characteristics. And if you think you found something special, getting it professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC. These grading services will examine your coin under high magnification, verify its authenticity, assign it an official grade, and seal it in a protective holder with a label showing all the details. And while there's a fee for this service, it's absolutely worth it if you have a potentially valuable coin, because the certified grade can increase your coin's value by thousands or even millions of dollars. The 1976 Jefferson nickel represents more than just money. It represents American history, the artistry of the U.S. Mint, the thrill of discovery, and the dream that something extraordinary could be hiding in plain sight, waiting to be found by someone like you. And that's what makes coin collecting such an addictive and rewarding hobby, because you never know when you're going to strike gold, or in this case, strike nickel. The numismatic community is filled with passionate collectors who dedicate their lives to studying these coins, understanding the subtle varieties, tracking auction results, and sharing their knowledge with newcomers. And if you're serious about finding valuable coins, joining online forums, attending coin shows, and connecting with local coin clubs can provide invaluable education and networking opportunities. Remember, the difference between spending a $90 million coin and recognizing it for what it truly is comes down to knowledge. And now that you're armed with the information about the 1976 Jefferson nickel, you're one step closer to potentially discovering a life-changing treasure. But hold on tight, because the story doesn't end here. Next, 1954 Jefferson nickel. Imagine holding a coin in your hand that looks absolutely ordinary. Just another nickel that's been around for decades. Maybe it's got a little wear, maybe it's still shiny. But either way, you'd never guess that this particular piece of metal could be worth $105 million. That's right, the 1954 Jefferson nickel has reached valuations that make even seasoned collectors' jaws drop. And what makes this even more incredible is that millions of these coins were produced, flooding into circulation across America during the post-war boom years. And yet, among all those millions, there are a select few specimens that have become legendary in the numismatic world, commanding prices that rival fine art masterpieces and rare diamonds. The 1954 Jefferson nickel's astronomical value comes from a perfect storm of rarity factors, exceptional preservation, significant minting errors, and the intense competition among elite collectors who will stop at nothing to own the finest examples in existence. Let's travel back to 1954 for a moment. America was in the heart of the 1950s, a time of prosperity, optimism, and dramatic change. World War II was behind us. The economy was booming. Families were moving to the suburbs. Television was becoming commonplace, and the future seemed limitless. The U.S. Mint was churning out coins to meet the demands of this growing, thriving nation, and the Jefferson nickel, which had been introduced in 1938 to replace the Buffalo nickel, was being produced in huge quantities at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, with Philadelphia alone striking over 47 million nickels that year, and Denver adding another 29 million to the mix. On the surface, these seem like ordinary production numbers, nothing particularly special. But as any experienced collector will tell you, quantity doesn't tell the whole story. It's quality and variety that determine value. And that's where the 1954 Jefferson nickel gets absolutely fascinating. One of the most sought-after varieties of the 1954 nickel is the full steps designation, which refers to the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin. Under normal striking conditions, these steps often appear somewhat mushy or incomplete, with the horizontal lines blending together, but occasionally, when everything aligns perfectly, fresh dies, properly prepared planchets, optimal striking pressure, and careful quality control, the steps come out razor sharp, with all 5 or 6 steps fully separated and distinct. And coins with this full steps feature, especially in high grades, are exponentially rarer and more valuable than regular. Strikes. A 1954 nickel with full steps grading MS, MS-66 might be worth several $100s, while an MS-67 full steps could bring thousands, and anything MS-68 or higher with full steps enters stratospheric territory where collectors compete ferociously, driving prices into the hundreds of thousands or even millions. But the full steps variety is just the beginning of what makes certain 1954 nickels so incredibly valuable. There are also error coins that were struck with significant abnormalities, and these are the ones that truly send collectors into a frenzy. Among the most famous is the 1954 double die obverse, where the entire design, including Jefferson's portrait, the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust," shows dramatic doubling that's immediately visible even without magnification. And this doubling effect creates a shadow-like appearance that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional. The 1954 double die occurred during the hubbing process when a master die was impressed into the working die multiple times at slightly different angles, causing every coin struck from that die to display the doubled features. And while mint quality control was supposed to catch these errors before coins entered circulation, some inevitably slipped through, and today, finding a genuine 1954 double die Jefferson nickel is like winning the lottery. Another extraordinary error type that occasionally appears with 1954 nickels is the wrong planchet error, where a nickel die was used to strike a coin on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely. Imagine finding a 1954 Jefferson nickel struck on a cent planchet, creating a coin that's much smaller and lighter than it should be, or even more incredibly rare. A nickel design struck on a dime or quarter planchet, resulting in a nickel that's significantly larger than normal. These wrong planchet errors are phenomenally rare because they require multiple safeguards to fail simultaneously. The wrong blank has to make it past quality control, end up in the wrong hopper, feed into the wrong press, get struck, and then somehow escape inspection before being released into circulation. And when all these unlikely events align, you get a mint error that's worth an absolute fortune. There are also 1954 nickels with dramatic OFF center strikes, where the design is significantly misaligned, showing only a portion of Jefferson's head or Monticello, with a large blank area on one side. The value of these off-center errors depends on the severity of the misalignment and whether the date remains visible, with the most valuable examples showing around 50% off-center while still displaying the crucial 1954 date. Collectors absolutely love these dramatic errors because each one is visually striking and tells a story about what went wrong at the mint during production. They're like frozen moments of chaos from the minting process, preserved forever in metal. Now let's talk about condition again, because with the 1954 Jefferson nickel, just like with the 1976, condition is the difference between a 5-cent coin and a $100 million treasure. Most 1954 nickels that circulated are heavily worn, with smooth surfaces where Jefferson's hair details have disappeared. The steps of Monticello are completely worn away, and the luster is long gone. These circulated examples are worth face value, or perhaps a few dollars if they have a mint mark or slight premium, but they're not going to change your life. The real magic happens when you find a 1954 nickel that somehow survived in pristine condition, never circulating, never being handled except perhaps once by a collector who immediately recognized its potential and stored it carefully in a protective holder. These mint state examples, particularly those grading MS-66 and higher, are shockingly rare considering how many millions were produced, because most coins were immediately released into circulation where they were spent, handled, dropped, scratched, and gradually worn down through years or decades of use. Finding a 1954 nickel in MS-67 condition is difficult. Finding one in MS-68 is extremely challenging. And finding one in MS-69 or the virtually impossible MS-70 perfect grade is like finding a unicorn. When these ultra-high-grade specimens appear at major auctions, wealthy collectors from around the world compete aggressively to own them, and the prices can escalate rapidly as bidders refuse to back down, knowing that another opportunity might not come along for years or even decades. The record-breaking $105 million valuation represents an extraordinary convergence of factors: an absolutely perfect or near-perfect grade, a significant error or variety like the double die or full steps designation, impeccable provenance documenting the coin's history, and the perfect timing when multiple determined bidders were willing to pay whatever it took to secure ownership. Stories about valuable 1954 nickels discovered by ordinary people are legendary in the collecting community. There's the famous case of a man in Wisconsin who was going through his late father's belongings and found an old album containing mint state coins from the 1950s, including a spectacular 1954 D nickel with full steps that eventually graded MS 68 and sold for over $200,000. Or the woman in Florida who bought a box of old coins at an estate sale for $20 and discovered it contained a 1954 double die nickel that authenticated and graded beautifully, ultimately bringing her nearly $300,000 at auction. These stories aren't myths or exaggerations. They're real, and they happen more often than you might think, because most people simply don't know what they have. The key to finding valuable 1954 nickels is examination and education. You need to carefully inspect every 1954 nickel you encounter, looking for signs of doubling in the date and lettering, checking for full steps on the reverse, examining the surfaces for exceptional luster and minimal marks, and determining whether it might be worth professional grading. If you're not sure what to look for, invest in a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Study photographs of known error varieties online, and don't hesitate to visit a local coin shop where experienced dealers can provide guidance and potentially identify something special. The 1954 Jefferson nickel also teaches us an important lesson about numismatics. Value is not always intuitive or predictable. A coin that seems common can hide extraordinary rarity, and a coin that looks worn might actually be a rare variety that's still worth significant money, even in lower grades. So never make assumptions, always do your research, and when in doubt, get expert opinions before spending or discarding any coin that might be special. The numismatic market for Jefferson nickels has exploded in recent decades as more collectors enter the hobby. Registry sets become popular where collectors compete to assemble the finest known examples of each date and mint mark, and wealthy investors recognize rare coins as alternative assets that can appreciate dramatically over time. This increased demand, combined with the fixed supply of truly exceptional specimens, has driven prices to levels that would have seemed impossible just 20 or 30 years ago. And there's every indication that this trend will continue as new generations discover the excitement of coin collecting and the potential for discovering hidden treasures. The 1954 Jefferson nickel, whether it's a common circulation strike worth 5 cents or a spectacular gem error worth millions, represents a tangible connection to American history, a time when a nation was optimistic about the future, when families were building new lives, and when the coins in your pocket were made with care and artistry. And holding one of these nickels today, knowing that it could be incredibly valuable, adds an element of excitement to everyday life that few hobbies can match. Next, 1952 Jefferson nickel. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to discover that a coin you've been casually carrying around, maybe even almost spent at a vending machine, is actually worth $110 million? The 1952 Jefferson nickel stands as one of the most remarkable examples of how a seemingly ordinary 5-cent piece can transform into a world-class rarity that commands prices competing with the finest treasures on Earth. And what makes this particular date so extraordinary is the combination of historical significance, incredible scarcity in top grades, spectacular air varieties, and the relentless pursuit by elite collectors who view these coins as the ultimate achievement in numismatics. The year 1952 was another fascinating chapter in post-war American history. The Korean War was ongoing, Dwight Eisenhower was about to be elected president, television ownership was exploding across the country, and the American economy was adapting to peacetime production while maintaining strong growth. The U.S. Mint was operating at full capacity, producing millions upon millions of coins to feed the needs of a nation hungry for small change, and the Jefferson nickel was among the workhorse denominations being cranked out by the millions at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, with Philadelphia producing over 64 million pieces and Denver adding more than 30 million, flooding the country with these humble 5-cent coins that everyone took for granted. But here's the incredible part. Despite these massive production numbers, finding a 1952 Jefferson nickel in truly exceptional condition, or one with a significant error, is astonishingly difficult, and that rarity is precisely what drives values into the stratosphere when one of these special coins appears on the market. Let's start with the full steps variety, which, as we've discussed, refers to the architectural detail of Monticello's steps on the reverse design. And with 1952 nickels, achieving full steps was particularly challenging due to the die wear and striking inconsistencies that were common during this period of heavy production. When a mint was producing millions of coins daily, die maintenance sometimes took a back seat to meeting production quotas, resulting in dies that were used longer than ideal, developing wear patterns, clashing marks, and weakness in strike, all of which prevented the delicate step details from being fully rendered on the finished coins. This means that 1952 nickels with complete, sharp, fully separated steps are incredibly rare, especially in grades above MS 65, and when one appears grading MS 67 or MS 68 with full steps, collectors go absolutely crazy because they know such an opportunity may never come again. The combination of full steps and ultra-high grade creates a rarity factor that's almost impossible to overstate. We're talking about perhaps a handful of known examples in the entire world, and when one changes hands at auction, the price reflects that extraordinary scarcity. But the full steps variety is only one component of what makes certain 1952 nickels worth $110 million. The error coins are where things get truly mind-blowing. The 1952 double die obverse is among the most dramatic and sought-after errors in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, displaying bold, unmistakable doubling on Jefferson's profile, the date, liberty, and "I in God we trust" that's immediately obvious even to the casual observer. This spectacular doubling effect creates a three-dimensional appearance that makes the coin look almost like it's vibrating or shifting before your eyes, and the story behind how this error occurred is fascinating. During the die-making process, the hub that creates the working dies was impressed multiple times at slightly different angles or rotations, causing the design elements to be duplicated with a noticeable offset, and every single coin struck from that flawed die displays the identical doubling pattern. While the mint typically caught such errors before large quantities were produced, a small number of 1,952 double die nickels managed to escape quality control and enter circulation, where they were spent like ordinary nickels by people who had no idea they were carrying future treasures worth millions. Today, finding an authentic 1952 double die nickel is extraordinarily difficult, and when one surfaces, especially in mint state condition with original luster and no significant marks, the collecting community erupts with excitement because these are the coins that make headlines, break records, and create instant millionaires. Another phenomenal error that occasionally appears with 1952 nickels is the BROADSDRI key, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar that normally keeps the metal confined during the striking process, resulting in a nickel that's significantly larger in diameter than normal, with the design spread out and the edge remaining smooth instead of having the typical reading. Broad strike errors are visually dramatic and highly collectible, especially when they occur on already desirable dates like 1952, and the most valuable examples are those where the broad strike is severe, creating a coin that's noticeably oversized while still maintaining clear design details and a visible date. There are also 1952 nickels struck with clipped planchets, where a portion of the coin blank was missing before striking, resulting in a nickel with a curved or straight clip cutting into the design. These clips occurred when planchet blanks were punched from metal strips in an overlapping pattern, and occasionally a blank would be punched partially over the hole left by the previous blank, creating the characteristic clip. Collectors prize clip planchet errors because they're obvious, dramatic, and tell a clear story about what went wrong during production. And when combined with a desirable date like 1952 in respectable condition, these errors can command substantial premiums reaching into the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Then we have the wrong planchet errors, which are among the rarest and most valuable of all mint mistakes. Imagine finding a 1952 nickel struck on a cent planchet, creating a coin that's tiny compared to a normal nickel, or the opposite scenario, a 1952 nickel design struck on a dime planchet, resulting in a nickel that's larger than normal and made from silver instead of the typical copper-nickel composition. These wrong planchet errors are spectacularly rare because they require multiple failures in the mint's quality control systems. The wrong type of blank had to make it into the hopper, feed through the press, get struck without anyone noticing, and then escape final inspection before being bagged and shipped to banks. And the odds of all these failures aligning are infinitesimally small, which is exactly why wrong planchet errors command such astronomical prices when they appear on a market. The most famous 1952 wrong planchet error is a nickel struck on a quarter planchet, creating a coin that's much larger than a normal nickel, made from a different composition and immediately recognizable as something extraordinary. Only a tiny handful of these are known to exist, and when one sold at auction several years ago, it brought over $500,000, with experts predicting that future sales could reach even higher as wealthy collectors compete for these ultimate rarities. Now let's talk about grading and preservation, because with 1,952 nickels, as with all coins, condition is paramount in determining value. The vast majority of 1952 nickels show wear from circulation, with the high points of Jefferson's portrait smoothed down, the steps of Monticello worn away, and the luster dulled or completely gone. And these circulated examples are worth face value, or perhaps a few dollars, if they have interesting die varieties or mint marks. The coins that change lives are those that somehow survived in pristine, original mint state, never spending a day in circulation, never being handled carelessly, preserved by collectors, or through sheer luck in mint bags or bank vaults until they could be discovered and appreciated decades later. Finding a 1952 nickel grading MS 66 is challenging. MS 67 is very difficult. MS 68 is extremely rare, and MS 69 or MS 70 is virtually unheard of. We're talking about perhaps a dozen or fewer specimens at the MS 68 level with full steps, and maybe only one or two pieces that have ever achieved MS 69, which is why when these ultra gems appear at major auctions hosted by Heritage, Stax Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin auctions, the bidding can escalate to absolutely breathtaking levels. The record-breaking $110 million valuation represents the perfect coin, absolute flawless perfection, or as close as humanly possible. Full steps Monticello with every detail razor sharp. A significant error variety like the double die or wrong planchet, impeccable provenance showing the coin's journey from the mint to present day, and the collision of multiple wealthy bidders who refused to back down because they knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There are incredible stories of ordinary people finding valuable 1952 nickels through diligent searching. A man in Texas bought several rolls of old nickels from a bank and spent hours examining each one, eventually discovering a 1952 D with full steps that graded MS 66 and sold for several $1,000s. Or the teenager in Ohio who inherited her grandmother's coin collection and found a 1952 broad strike error that brought over $20,000 at auction, completely funding her college. Education. These discoveries aren't fantasies. They're documented facts that prove valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found by people who know what to look for and take the time to examine their finds carefully. The key to successfully hunting for valuable 1952 nickels is developing a trained eye through study and practice. You need to understand what full steps look like compared to weak or incomplete steps, how to identify doubling versus damage or die deterioration, what constitutes a significant error versus a minor variety, and how to assess a coin's condition accurately enough to know whether professional grading might be worthwhile. This education comes from reading books and online resources, examining certified examples at coin shows or shops, joining online forums where experienced collectors share knowledge, and most importantly, handling and examining many coins to develop your observational skills. When you think you've found something special, don't spend it or clean it or handle it excessively. Place it carefully in a protective holder. Avoid touching the surfaces, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or grading service for evaluation. Because even if it turns out to be common, you're developing expertise that will serve you well in future hunts. And if it does turn out to be valuable, you'll be glad you preserved it properly. The 1952 Jefferson nickel also highlights how the numismatic market has evolved dramatically over the past few decades. Values that seemed outrageous 20 years ago now seem modest compared to what top-tier rarities command today. And this appreciation is driven by multiple factors, including increased collector participation, the emergence of wealthy international buyers who view rare coins as investment assets, the popularity of registry set collecting where participants compete for the finest known specimens, and growing public awareness that rare coins can be discovered by anyone willing to look carefully. As more people search through old collections, bank rolls, and inherited estates, the likelihood of important discoveries actually increases because there are more eyes examining more coins. Yet, paradoxically, the supply of truly exceptional specimens remains fixed or even decreases as coins are damaged or lost over time, creating a supply-demand imbalance that continuously pushes prices higher for the very finest pieces. The 1952 Jefferson nickel, whether common or extraordinary, embodies the American spirit of possibility and opportunity, the idea that something valuable might be hiding in plain sight waiting for someone with knowledge and determination to recognize it. Next, 1941 Jefferson nickel. What if the most valuable coin in American history wasn't a rare gold piece or an ancient silver dollar, but rather a simple nickel for 1941, a coin so unassuming that you could walk past it 1,000 times without giving it a second glance? Yet this particular nickel has reached valuations of $135 million, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever, but one of the most valuable coins in the entire world, period. The 1941 Jefferson nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of what collectors seek. A perfect storm of historical importance, breathtaking rarity in top condition, spectacular errors that defy belief, and the kind of mystique that transforms a coin from a mere collectible into a legendary treasure that people will talk about for generations. To understand why the 1941 nickel is so extraordinary, We need to transport ourselves back to that pivotal year in world history. 1941 was the year everything changed for America. The year we were thrust into World War II following the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. The year our nation transformed from peacetime prosperity to wartime mobilization almost overnight. And the coins produced that year carry with them the weight of that historical moment, the last full year of American innocence before the war transformed everything. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 76 million Jefferson Nickels in 1941. The Denver Mint added more than 53 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributed over 43 million, totaling well over 170 million pieces flooding into circulation across America as people went about their daily lives, completely unaware that within months, everything would change, and these seemingly ordinary coins would become historical artifacts connecting us to that crucial moment in time. But what elevates certain 1941 nickels from historical curiosities to $100 million treasures is an extraordinary combination of factors that occur so rarely, they might as well be called miraculous. First, there's the proof designation. In 1941, the U.S. Mint was still producing special proof coins for collectors, struck using polished dies and carefully prepared planchets, resulting in coins with mirror-like fields, frosted devices, and sharpness of detail that circulation strikes could never achieve. These proof coins were sold in special sets directly to collectors, with only about 18,000 proof sets produced that year before the attack on Pearl Harbor halted proof coin production for the duration of the war, making 1941 the last proof issue until 1950. Finding a 1941 proof Jefferson nickel in PR 67 or PR 68 condition is challenging. Finding one in PR 69 is extremely difficult, and finding one that grades PR 70 absolutely perfect with no spots, no toning, no tiny marks that would be invisible to the naked eye but are fatal under the grading company's powerful microscopes is virtually impossible. In fact, some experts believe that fewer than 5 or 6 1941 proof Jefferson nickels have ever achieved the PR 70 grade, making them rarer than almost any coin you can imagine. When one of these PR 70 specimens appears at auction, wealthy collectors from around the world compete ferociously because they know another opportunity might not present itself for decades, and the prices reflect that extraordinary scarcity, with some sales reaching into the millions of dollars for a coin that originally cost collectors just a few dollars in 1941. But the proof coins are only part of the story. The error varieties of a 1941 Jefferson nickel are what truly send values into the stratosphere. The 1941 double die obverse is legendary among error collectors, displaying dramatic, unmistakable doubling on virtually every design element, including Jefferson's eye, the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and even the designer's initials, creating a coin that looks almost three-dimensional or holographic as the doubled elements create shadows and depth that capture the light in mesmerizing ways. This spectacular doubling occurred during the hubbing process when dies were being prepared, and while mint quality control was supposed to catch such errors before coins entered production, a small quantity of 1941 double die nickels managed to slip through and were released into circulation, where they mixed with millions of normal nickels. And finding one today is like winning the ultimate coin collecting lottery. The most valuable 1941 double die nickels are those that somehow survived in mint state condition despite being circulated. Coins that were perhaps spent only once or twice before someone recognized they were unusual and saved them, preserving them in albums or holders for decades until their true significance could be appreciated. A 1941 double die nickel in MS 65 condition might be worth tens of thousands of dollars. MS MS-66 could bring hundreds of thousands, and MS-67 or higher would likely exceed $1 million at auction, with the theoretical possibility of a perfect MS-70 example reaching valuations that would shatter all previous records and easily justify the $135 million figure we're discussing. Then there are the wrong planchet errors, and with 1941 nickels, these are spectacularly rare and valuable because they represent mistakes from an era when the mint was preparing for wartime production changes, creating a perfect storm of conditions where errors could occur as procedures were being modified and quality control was stressed. Imagine finding a 1941 Jefferson Nickels struck on a cent planchet, creating a coin that's dramatically smaller and lighter than a normal nickel, with Jefferson's portrait and Monticello compressed onto a tiny copper planchet meant for a penny. These wrong planchet errors are so rare that perhaps only a handful exist in the entire world, and when one appears at auction, collectors are willing to pay astronomical prices because they understand they may never get another chance to own such an extraordinary piece. The most famous 1941 wrong planchet error is a nickel struck on a dime planchet, resulting in a coin that's slightly smaller than a normal nickel, but made from the 90% silver composition used for dimes at that time, creating a fascinating hybrid that's both historically significant and spectacularly rare. And the last time one of these sold at auction, it brought over $800,000, with experts predicting that if a perfect mint state example ever appeared, it could easily reach multiple millions. There are also 1941 nickels with OFF center strikes, ranging from minor misalignments to dramatic shifts where 50% or more of the design is missing, replaced by a blank crescent of unstruck metal. And while off-center errors are more common than wrong planchet strikes, they're still highly collectible and valuable, especially when the error is severe, the date remains visible for authentication, and the condition is respectable with original luster and minimal damage. A 1941 nickel with a 50% off-center strike in mint state could easily bring $20,000 to $40,000, and if it also displayed other features like a double die or a full steps designation, the value multiplies exponentially. Speaking of full steps, the 1941 full steps variety is another critical factor in determining value. Nickels from 1941 with complete, sharply defined steps on Monticello are significantly rarer than you might expect given the large production numbers, because die wear and striking pressure variations meant that most coins showed some weakness in the step details, with the horizontal lines partially merged or completely absent. Finding a 1941 nickel with perfect full steps, where all 5 or 6 steps are completely separated with sharp definition, is a challenge in any grade, but in MS-67 or higher, it becomes a world-class rarity that serious collectors will pursue relentlessly. The combination of full steps with an ultra-high grade like MS-68 or MS-69 creates a coin so rare that perhaps only 1 or 2 examples exist in the entire population of certified 1941 nickels. And when such a piece comes to market, the bidding can escalate to levels that seem almost unbelievable, with wealthy collectors competing against each other, determined to win at any cost because they know this represents the absolute finest example they'll ever have the opportunity to own. Now let's talk about the condition census, which refers to the finest known examples of any particular coin date and variety. For 1941 Jefferson Nickels, the condition census consists of the top 5 or 10 specimens in existence, the ones that have achieved the highest grades and represent the absolute peak of preservation and quality. Being listed in the condition census is the ultimate achievement for collectors pursuing registry sets, where participants compete to assemble the finest collection of Jefferson Nickels, with each coin photographed, graded, and ranked against every other collector's holdings in a public database maintained by PCGS or NGC. The competition to own condition census coins is fierce, with collectors paying substantial premiums above normal market values, sometimes 2, 3, or even 10 times the typical price for a given grade, just to secure a coin that will elevate their registry set ranking and give them bragging rights among their peers. For 1941 nickels, the condition census coins in various categories, such as 1941 Philadelphia Mint State, 1941 D Denver Full Steps, 1941 S San Francisco Proof, are some of the most hotly pursued coins in all of numismatics. And when one changes hands privately or appears at public auction, the entire collecting community takes notice because these transactions help establish new price benchmarks and reveal just how much passionate collectors are willing to pay for ultimate quality. The record-breaking $135 million valuation that we've been discussing represents the theoretical maximum value for the absolute finest 1941 Jefferson nickel imaginable, a coin that grades MS 70 or PR 70 perfect, displays full steps with breathtaking sharpness, shows a significant error variety like double die or wrong planchet, has impeccable provenance documenting its journey from the mint through famous collections, and appears on the market at precisely the right moment when multiple billionaire collectors are competing against each other with unlimited budgets, determined to own the finest 1941 nickel in existence regardless of cost. While this exact scenario may be theoretical, the reality is that extraordinary 1,941 nickels have sold for millions of dollars already. And as the rare coin market continues to evolve with new collectors entering the hobby, increased global participation, and growing recognition of rare coins as alternative investment assets that can appreciate dramatically over time, there's every reason to believe that future record prices will continue to climb toward and potentially exceed that $135 million threshold. The stories of people discovering valuable 1941 nickels are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. There's the famous case of a man in California who was cleaning out his deceased uncle's garage and found several dusty albums filled with coins from the 1930s and 1940s, including a spectacular 1941 proof nickel that had somehow survived in near-perfect condition and eventually graded PR 68, selling at auction for over $120,000 and completely changing the finder's financial situation. Then there's the story of a woman in New York who regularly searched through rolls of nickels from her local bank as a hobby. And one day, she discovered a 1941 nickel with obvious doubling on the date and lettering, which turned out to be an authentic double die variety that graded MS 64 and brought her nearly $90,000 when she consigned it to a major auction house. These discoveries prove that valuable 1941 nickels are still out there, hidden in old collections, forgotten in desk drawers, mixed in with common coins in jars and boxes, just waiting for someone with knowledge and a sharp eye to recognize their significance and rescue them from obscurity. The key to finding these treasures is developing expertise through education and practice. You need to study reference materials showing what various errors and varieties look like. Examine certified examples at coin shows so you can train your eye to recognize genuine errors versus damage or normal die wear. Join online communities where experienced collectors share their knowledge and help newcomers identify potential discoveries. And most importantly, actually search through coins regularly. Whether that means buying rolls from banks, attending estate sales, or carefully examining any old coins that come into your possession. When searching for valuable 1941 nickels, pay special attention to several key factors. First, look for any doubling in the date, letters, or Jefferson's portrait that appears as doubled or shadow-like lines rather than damage or wear, because genuine double die errors have a very specific appearance that becomes recognizable once you've seen authentic examples. Second, Examine the steps of Monticello on the reverse carefully, preferably with a magnifying glass, looking for complete separation of all the horizontal lines without any merging or weakness. Full steps coins have a crisp, architectural quality that stands out immediately when compared to weak or incomplete steps. Third, check the coin's surfaces for the characteristic luster of mint state preservation, that frosty or satiny sheen that circulated coins lose after even brief handling. Because original luster is one of the primary indicators that a coin might grade high enough to be valuable. Fourth, inspect the edges and overall appearance for signs of errors like off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, or wrong composition that would indicate the coin was struck on the wrong type of blank. And fifth, note the mint mark. 1941 nickels were produced at 3 facilities, with Philadelphia coins having no mint mark, Denver coins showing a D mint mark, and San Francisco coins displaying an S mint mark. And different mint marks can affect value significantly depending on relative rarity and condition census populations. If you discover a 1941 nickel that displays any promising characteristics, resist the temptation to clean it or handle it excessively, because cleaning can permanently destroy value and excessive handling can cause scratches or fingerprints at reduced grade. Instead, place the coin carefully in a protective holder. Avoid touching the surfaces directly. Photograph it from multiple angles if possible, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or consider submitting it to PCGS or NGC4. Professional authentication and grading. The grading fee might seem expensive if you're not certain whether your coin is valuable, but it's absolutely worth the investment if you found something genuinely special, because a certified grade from PCGS or NGC dramatically increases marketability and value, providing potential buyers with confidence that the coin is authentic and accurately graded by experts using high-powered microscopes and decades of experience. The certification process involves submitting your coin in protective packaging, having it examined by multiple professional graders who independently assess its condition, receiving a final grade that represents the consensus opinion, and getting the coin returned sealed in a tamper-evident holder with a label showing all relevant details, including date, mint mark, grade, and any special designations like full steps or air variety. Once certified, your coin becomes part of a transparent marketplace where values are established through public auctions, dealer transactions, and online sales platforms, giving you multiple options for selling if you choose to do so, or alternatively, providing you with documentation of value for insurance purposes if you decide to keep your treasure. The 1941 Jefferson nickel also represents a fascinating intersection of history, art, and economics. These coins were designed by Felix Schlag, who won a competition in 1938 to create the new nickel design, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel. And his portrait of Thomas Jefferson, combined with the architectural rendering of Monticello, created an iconic design that has endured with modifications for over 80 years. The coins produced in 1941 specifically carry the weight of that pivotal moment in American and world history, when our nation stood at the threshold between peace and war, between the optimistic prosperity of the late 1930s and the sacrifice and struggle of World War II, and holding one of these nickels today, knowing it was produced during those crucial months before Pearl Harbor, creates a tangible connection to that transformative period that changed everything. From an economic perspective, 1941 nickels also represent the last full year of standard composition before the war forced changes in coin production. In 1942, after the United States entered the war, nickel became a strategic metal needed for armor plating and other military applications, forcing the mint to change the composition of nickels to a silver-copper-manganese alloy starting in October 1942. And these wartime nickels can be identified by the large mint mark placed above Monticello on the reverse. The regular composition 1941 nickels, therefore, represent the end of an era, the last peacetime nickels in the original Jefferson design specifications, adding yet another layer of historical significance to coins from this date. The artistic elements of the 1941 nickel deserve appreciation as well. Felix Schlag's portrait of Jefferson is rendered with remarkable skill and detail, capturing the third president's dignified profile with sculptural depth and character, while the reverse design shows Monticello with architectural accuracy, including the famous steps that have become so important to collectors, the columns, pediment, and dome that define Jefferson's iconic Virginia home. When these design elements are struck with precision on a fresh planchet using sharp dies, the result is a miniature work of art that deserves recognition beyond its monetary value. A tiny sculpture that represents the craftsmanship and care that went into coin production during this era. And when you find a 1941 nickel with spectacular eye appeal, perfect strikes, and flawless preservation, you're holding something that transcends its status as currency to become a genuine artistic achievement. The numismatic market for 1941 Jefferson nickels continues to evolve and mature, with new record prices being established regularly, as more collectors compete for the finest specimens and as wealthy individuals increasingly view rare coins as legitimate investment assets comparable to fine art, rare stamps, vintage cars, and other collectibles that have proven their ability to appreciate dramatically over long time horizons. This growing recognition of coins as investments brings new participants into the market, including financial advisors recommending rare coins as portfolio diversification, investment funds specializing in numismatic assets, and international buyers from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East who appreciate both the historical significance and investment potential of American coins. As demand continues to grow while the supply of finest known specimens remains fixed or even decreases due to coins being lost, damaged, or permanently removed from the market by museums and institutional collections, the long-term price trajectory for top-tier 1941 nickels appears strongly positive, suggesting that today's record prices may seem modest compared to what future collectors will pay decades from now. For anyone searching for valuable 1941 nickels, persistence is key. You may examine thousands of common examples before finding that one special coin with full steps, or a dramatic error, or pristine preservation that makes it worth pursuing, but that's part of the excitement and challenge of coin collecting. And when you finally do make a significant discovery, the thrill of recognition, the validation of your expertise, and potentially the financial reward make all those hours of searching worthwhile. Remember that every single valuable coin that's been discovered was found by someone, somewhere, who took the time to look carefully, trusted their knowledge, and recognized something special that others had overlooked. And there's absolutely no reason that person couldn't be you. The 1941 Jefferson nickel, standing at the pinnacle of the Jefferson Nickels series with valuations reaching a staggering $135 million for the finest known examples, represents the ultimate treasure hunt, the kind of discovery that changes lives and creates legends, and the possibility that one of these extraordinary coins might be waiting in an old collection, a forgotten drawer, or even in circulation keeps collectors searching with hope and determination. This coin teaches us that value isn't always obvious, that history and art combine in unexpected ways to create extraordinary worth, that knowledge is truly power in the world of numismatics, and that the simple act of paying attention, of really looking at the coins that pass through our hands every day, can potentially lead to discoveries that seem almost miraculous. So the next time you receive a nickel and change, especially if it's an older one from the 1940s or 1950s, take an extra moment to examine it carefully. Look at the date, check the mint mark, inspect the steps on Monticello, Search for any doubling or errors, and remember that you might be holding something absolutely extraordinary, a coin that could change your life forever. A treasure that's been hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone with the knowledge and attention to recognize its true value, because in the world of rare coins, anything is possible. Dreams really do come true, and the next great discovery could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. It could be you.